Welcome to Lesson 6 in this series covering American government and politics. The lesson has been created to support the teaching of A-Level politics. In this lesson, we consider the oversight powers of Congress. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to answer the following questions. How does Congress exercise oversight of the President? How effective is that oversight? And what factors determine the effectiveness of congressional oversight? Let's start by outlining the roles of standing committees in the oversight process. Standing committees have responsibility for legislation and executive oversight in specific areas of policy. They are divided into subcommittees, with each having a more specific area of policy focus than the main committee. Congressional committees are the only forums where the legislature can directly question members of the executive. There is no equivalent of the British PMQs. The committee's membership is divided according to the party balance in the whole chamber, and the chairmanship will be held by the majority party. What are the functions of these standing committees? Firstly, they have an important role in the legislative process. The committee stage of a bill's passage through Congress will include committee hearings on a bill. Witnesses from business, academia, think tanks, interest groups, and the executive will be called to give evidence. For example, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act 2022 was considered by the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. Standing committees will also conduct investigations into problems and issues in their area of policy speciality. For example, in 2018, the Senate Commerce Committee concluded an 18-month investigation into sexual abuse in the U.S. gymnastics team. In 2024, the House Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee launched an investigation into the assassination attempt of President Trump. In rare cases, Congress may establish a select committee to consider an area of particular concern or that crosses the jurisdictions of several committees. For example, in 2014, the House Select Committee on Benghazi investigated the attack on a U.S. compound in Libya. Another example is the House Select Committee on the January 6th attack on Congress, which was established in 2021. Finally, standing committees will conduct confirmation hearings of presidential appointments to the executive and judiciary. The standing committees will investigate the backgrounds of nominees and ask detailed questions. In some cases, they will unearth allegations of past misconduct. Those unlikely to be confirmed tend to drop out at the committee stage before they are subject to a vote by the full Senate. For example, Associate Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh was subject to 4 days of questioning by the Senate Judiciary Committee before a 11-10 committee vote. The hearing process uncovered allegations of sexual assault. These allegations were strongly denied. Now that we have outlined the role of standing and select committees in the oversight function, let's consider how effectively Congress carries out its oversight role. We shall begin with impeachment as a form of oversight. It could be argued that impeachment is an effective tool of oversight. Any senior federal public official can be impeached and tried. This demonstrates that no individual in government is above the law. In cases where guilt was clear and the threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors is met, the process seems to work. To date, 19 federal officers have been impeached. These include 3 presidents, 2 cabinet secretaries, and one Supreme Court Justice, Samuel Chase, in 1805. Of those impeached, 7 have been convicted. All 7 were members of the judiciary rather than political officials. In cases where guilt was clear and the threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors is met, the process works. For example, President Nixon resigned before facing impeachment in 1974. However, no impeachment of a political official has ever resulted in a Senate conviction. The Senate has only ever convicted judges on impeachment charges, 7 as of 2024. No political official, a president, vice president, or member of the executive, has ever been convicted. The requirement for a 2/3 majority makes a conviction hard to secure. This is true even if the president faces a Senate controlled by the opposing party. For example, in 1999, President Clinton was tried by a Republican-controlled Senate but survived. Another argument against the impeachment process being effective is that it is a highly politicized process. To be successful as a tool of controlling a president, impeachment probably requires divided government. It also requires presidents with low public approval. Impeachments of presidents tend to be highly politicized. All 3 impeached presidents have been impeached by houses controlled by the opposing party. In the case of the Clinton and Trump impeachments, both were attempted when approval ratings were relatively low against presidents with small election mandates. Now let's consider the effectiveness of oversight undertaken by standing and select committee investigations. Committees of Congress can force public scrutiny of almost any individual or organization in a public setting. Congressional committees can force testimony from any U.S. citizen, member of the executive, corporation, or group. Uncooperative witnesses can be declared in contempt of Congress, which can lead to a prison sentence. It is also a criminal offense to lie in testimony. A good example of the power of Congress to require witnesses to appear is Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. He was required to testify to the Senate Judiciary Committee about social media and online child exploitation. It perhaps shows the power of congressional committees that Zuckerberg has declined to appear before a UK Parliamentary Select Committee. There are some recent examples of Congress using its power to declare non-cooperative witnesses in contempt. Trump strategist Steve Bannon was sentenced to 4 months for contempt of Congress after he refused to cooperate with the Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack. In 2018, Trump aide Michael Cohen was sentenced to 2 months for lying to the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. Some committee investigations by Congress result in bipartisan solutions to important issues. These are more likely on issues that are apolitical or non-ideological. For example, sexual abuse in the U.S. gymnastics team received bipartisan condemnation. The Senate Commerce Committee then conducted an 18-month investigation. On the basis of its findings, Democrat Senator Moran and Republican Senator Blumenthal drafted the Bipartisan Empowering Amateur and Olympic Athletes Act of 2019. However, despite the power of subpoena and finding witnesses in contempt of Congress, powerful witnesses can and do avoid testimony. Even if witnesses agree to appear, they can refuse to provide testimony by exercising their Fifth Amendment rights. The Fifth Amendment of the Constitution gives citizens the right not to testify if they choose. For example, former president of USA Gymnastics, Steve Penny, exercised his Fifth Amendment rights to refuse to answer questions regarding sexual abuse in the U.S. gymnastics team. It is also the case that those who allegedly lie to Congress are rarely charged and convicted. In some cases, they are pardoned by presidents. For example, Roger Stone was pardoned by President Trump for lying to Congress, amongst other offenses. Furthermore, being indicted for contempt does not always lead to formal charges. Trump aide Mark Meadows was indicted by Congress in 2021 for contempt but never faced charges. It is also the case that many high-profile investigations can be viewed as political posturing and point scoring, rather than objective searches for the truth. The most prominent committee investigations can often appear politically motivated. For example, the Benghazi Select Committee was seen as politicized by Republicans to undermine Hillary Clinton's run for president. Democrats were accused of using the investigation into the January 6th attack to undermine Trump's election campaign in 2024. Some Republicans have used the investigation into the Trump assassination attempt to question diversity hiring practices in the Secret Service. However, in less politically charged investigations, there is an opportunity for a bipartisan and objective search for the truth. Finally, let's consider if Senate confirmation hearings provide effective oversight. It could be argued that confirmation hearings ensure that nominees for high political and judicial office meet the highest personal and professional standards. The thoroughness of the confirmation hearing process ensures that nominees are properly vetted before appointment. It also ensures each nominee meets the highest personal and professional standards to hold high political or judicial office. The process also happens in a public and open setting, where interest groups and members of the public can contribute. For example, the confirmation process identified allegations of sexual assault by Brett Kavanaugh during confirmation as an Associate Supreme Court Justice, allegations of sexual harassment by Clarence Thomas during confirmation as an Associate Supreme Court Justice, and allegations that Andrew Pudzer, nominated as Secretary of Labor by President Trump in 2016, hired an undocumented worker as a nanny. These allegations were denied by those concerned. Clearly, if these allegations were true, it is important that they are unearthed. It is also important that nominees are questioned in a public setting. However, others argue that the confirmation process is highly politicized. Some think it is more focused on political point scoring than objectively searching for the truth. It could be argued that questions about private opinions and history are unrelated to the professional ability of unelected officials. Associate Justice Clarence Thomas described his confirmation hearings as a high-tech lynching. Furthermore, the process contributes to the politicization of the Supreme Court. This can undermine its legal independence, integrity, political neutrality, and authority. In summary, Congress can exercise oversight over the other branches of government in three principal ways: the impeachment process, standing and select committee investigations, and the confirmation process. The effectiveness of each of these methods varies, and all are subject to criticism for being over-politicized.